The autumn twilight was coming earlier in the suburbs of Massachusetts. Elizabeth Wilson took a deep breath as she looked out the kitchen window. In the backyard, her 10-year-old daughter Lily was jumping into piles of fallen leaves, giggling with delight. While preparing dinner, Elizabeth sighed as she thought back on the week. "Mom, look. This leaf is shaped like a heart." Lily burst into the kitchen excitedly. Her cheeks were flushed red from the cold air outside, and small leaves were tangled in her brown hair. "That's lovely, Lily," Elizabeth smiled as she removed the leaves from her daughter's hair. "Would you like to help me? I'm making a salad." Lily nodded and began washing her hands. "When is Dad coming home?" "He said he'll be late today. There's some paperwork to take care of for Grandma's." Elizabeth chose her words carefully. "There are various procedures to handle for Grandma." Lily's expression clouded. "Do you think Grandma is happy in heaven?" Elizabeth hugged her daughter. "I'm sure she is. So don't worry." 3 days ago, Richard's mother Judith had died suddenly from a heart attack. Until then, she had no health problems and was always an energetic, active woman. Richard had found Judith and called an ambulance, but it was too late by the time they reached the hospital. The phone rang, and Elizabeth dried her hands before answering. It was Richard. "Hey, Liz. I don't think I can make it home today. The meeting with Mom's lawyer is taking longer than expected." His voice sounded tired, but there was also a sense of restlessness. "I understand. But have you contacted the funeral home yet? They said we need to decide by tomorrow, didn't they?" "Oh, that." Richard hesitated for a moment. "Carol is handling those arrangements." Elizabeth frowned. Carol was his company secretary, whose name had been coming up frequently lately. "I see. Do you want to say goodnight to Lily?" "Not tonight. I'll make time to talk to her properly tomorrow," he said hurriedly. "Goodbye for now." After hanging up, Elizabeth felt an inexplicable anxiety spreading in her chest. Since his mother's death, Richard seemed more frantic than grieving. Was that Dad? Lily looked up from the salad bowl. "He's going to be late because of work. Come on, let's have dinner, just the two of us." After dinner, while Lily was taking a bath, Elizabeth stared at the keys to Judith's house. They were scheduled to sort through her belongings tomorrow. She thought about the relationship between Richard and Judith. They were close, but there was occasional tension. Especially when Richard's work came up, Judith always wore a worried expression. "What concerns me is that you're pushing yourself too hard," she remembered Judith saying at last month's Sunday dinner. "And you need to cherish your family." Richard had brushed off his mother's advice at the time, but thinking back, perhaps she was trying to say something important. The next morning, after dropping Lily off at school, Elizabeth headed to Judith's house. Richard didn't accompany her, saying he had an important meeting. The two-story house surrounded by a spacious garden seemed to sadly proclaim the absence of its owner. When Elizabeth inserted the key, a familiar scent wafted from inside. The smell of vanilla and cinnamon. The scent of Judith's special.
Can you imagine making $10,000 a month just from YouTube, all from home? That's exactly what I did with Reddit Stories. No face, no voice. Check the link in the description if you're curious.
The apple pie. Entering the living room, Judith's life was everywhere. Knitting left halfway on the sofa, a recent book left open on the side table, and family photos hanging on the wall. Pictures of Richard as a child, photos of when Lily was born, and a family portrait taken last Christmas. Elizabeth sat on the sofa and looked around. Memories of this house came flooding back. But at the same time, she felt something was off. Judith was a very meticulous person, but the papers and letters scattered about didn't seem like her usual style. Standing up and walking around the room, Elizabeth wondered what had happened in Judith's final days. Then, she made a decision. To understand the reason behind Richard's strange behavior, she would thoroughly sort through the belongings in this house. She decided to pick up Lily after school and return here with her. "Shall we start with Grandma's bedroom?" Elizabeth suggested. She had just picked up Lily from school, and they had returned to Judith's house. "Okay," Lily answered quietly. She used to love coming to Grandma's house, but today felt different. With Judith's presence gone from the house, the room seemed oddly large, with sounds echoing. Entering the bedroom, the bed was perfectly made. That was so like Judith's meticulousness. A white lace bed cover, a hand-knitted blanket gently placed on the pillow. On the dresser sat a small jewelry box and several family photos. Elizabeth picked up the jewelry box. "This was Grandma's precious treasure," she said to Lily as she opened the box. "Her wedding ring, pearl necklace, and..." She broke off. "What's wrong, Mom?" "The ruby brooch is missing," Elizabeth checked inside the box. "The red brooch that Grandma always wore on special occasions. Remember?" Lily nodded. "The one she wore at Christmas." She said, "This is my lucky charm." "Yes. But it's not here." Elizabeth looked around. Perhaps Judith had been wearing it last. Next, they began opening the drawers of a large oak dresser. They checked each neatly folded item of clothing, separating those to donate and those to keep as family mementos. When Lily found Grandma's cashmere sweater, she held it against her cheek and inhaled its scent. "It smells like Grandma," tears welled up in her eyes. Elizabeth gently embraced her daughter. "It's okay. Grandma is always watching over us." When they found a photo album, Lily perked up a bit. They sat on the floor, turning pages and sharing memories. Young Judith, Richard as a child, and records of Lily's growth from birth until now. "Dad smiled a lot when he was a kid," Lily remarked. Elizabeth gazed at the photo. Indeed, the young Richard wore a carefree smile unlike now. "Yes. People change," she answered quietly. While Lily explored Grandma's closet, Elizabeth headed to the study. Judith was a former high school teacher who enjoyed reading and writing even after retirement. The well-organized study contained categorized bookshelves and a beautiful wooden writing desk. When Elizabeth opened the desk drawer, she found neatly arranged document files. Insurance policies, real estate documents, bank statements. All classified with Judith's characteristic meticulousness. One file caught her eye. Labeled life insurance, it looked newer than the other files. Opening it, Elizabeth gasped. Judith had renewed her insurance contract 6 months ago and significantly increased the amount. The beneficiary was Richard Wilson, and the amount was an astonishing $500,000. "Why?" Elizabeth whispered. Judith was never extravagant, but was such substantial insurance for Richard necessary? And why 6 months ago? As Elizabeth pondered this, Lily appeared at the study door. "Mom, I found Grandma's diary." She held a small leather-bound notebook. "Where did you find it?" "Under her pillow. She always said, 'Hide things you don't want seen in the most visible place.'" Lily mimicked her grandmother's words. Elizabeth took the diary. She started to open it but hesitated. "Let's read this later." She put the diary in her bag. "It's getting late. Let's head home for today." Back home, Richard hadn't returned yet. After putting Lily to bed, Elizabeth took out Judith's diary. The last entry was dated 1 week before her death. "I'm deeply worried about Richard. His company's financial situation seems much more serious than he admits. And his relationship with that woman, but I need evidence. Tomorrow, I plan to meet with my lawyer to discuss changing my will." Elizabeth closed the diary and sighed deeply. Doubts were beginning to grow in her mind. Was Richard's company really okay? Who was that woman? Late at night, Elizabeth woke to the sound of the front door. The living room clock showed 1 a.m. She could hear Richard taking off his shoes. "You're still up?" Richard seemed surprised as he entered the living room from the darkness. "I was waiting for you," Elizabeth said. "I found life insurance documents at your mother's house. Quite a substantial amount." Richard seemed to freeze for a moment but quickly shrugged it off. "Oh, that. Something Mother did for my sake. She was always thinking of me." He began pouring himself a drink from the bar. "Why did she increase it 6 months ago?" "I don't know. It was her decision." He changed the subject. "I have an important meeting with investors tomorrow. Better get some sleep." As Richard went upstairs, Elizabeth stared at Judith's diary and insurance documents. Something wasn't right. She felt she needed to go back to Judith's house tomorrow and investigate further. Late that night, just as Elizabeth had finally fallen asleep, Richard's cell phone rang. He sneaked into the bathroom and began speaking in a hushed voice. "I know. No, she doesn't know anything. Right, everything will be settled in a few days." Elizabeth half opened her eyes, watching the light seeping through the slight gap in the bathroom door. When Richard returned, she pretended to be asleep. The funeral was smaller than expected. Judith had many friends, but Richard hurriedly arranged the schedule and insisted on keeping it to a minimum number of people. Elizabeth felt uncomfortable but told herself that might be her husband's way of grieving. When Judith's friends came to pay their respects, they all said the same things. She was so healthy, she never mentioned any heart problems. It was too sudden. Elizabeth collected these words, comparing them with her own doubts. 3 days after the funeral, Richard left the house saying he had an important business trip. When asked about his destination, he only gave the vague answer, business. "Are you going to Florida?" Elizabeth asked while drinking her coffee. "Why do you think Florida?" Richard's voice had a note of wariness. "Because I saw a Florida plane ticket on your desk yesterday." "Oh, right," he averted his gaze. "A client is there. I'll be back in a few days." After Richard left, Elizabeth took Lily, who wasn't in school that day, and headed back to Judith's house. She couldn't shake the feeling that she might be missing something. "Where do we start today?" Lily asked as they entered the house. "Let's check Grandma's phone and computer," Elizabeth replied resolutely. "There might be some clues." "Clues?" Lily tilted her head. "To what?" Elizabeth hesitated for a moment. "I just want to know what Grandma was thinking, before the end." Judith's old laptop was in the desk drawer in the study. When they turned it on, a password screen appeared. "Try it," Elizabeth said to Lily. "Do you know Grandma's password?" Lily thought seriously. "Maybe." She faced the keyboard and typed Lily 2014. The screen unlocked. "How did you know?" Elizabeth was surprised. Lily gave a small smile. "It's the year I was born. Grandma always said, the day you were born was one of the happiest days of my life." Tears welled up in Elizabeth's eyes. She gently stroked her daughter's head. "Grandma truly loved you." They began examining the laptop's contents. Emails, document files, photos. Nothing particularly stood out, but in a folder called Personal, they found a file named RW Issues. Opening it, there was a list of dates and brief descriptions. It appeared to be notes on the financial situation of Richard's company. Words that stirred anxiety lined up: $3 million in debt, investor withdrawal, loan repayment default. And the last entry, dated 2 days before Judith's death, read, meeting with lawyer. Discussing will changes. This is. Elizabeth closed the file and took a deep breath. Richard's company was in a critical situation. Was that why he had been so anxious lately? Lily noticed her mother's change in expression. Are you okay? Yes, I'm fine, Elizabeth forced a smile. Let's look for Grandma's smartphone too. They searched the entire house but couldn't find Judith's old smartphone. Just as they were about to give up, Lily discovered a small black iPhone between the living room's sofa cushions. Found it, she exclaimed happily. The two searched for a charger and began charging the phone. They waited for the screen to light up. The passcode was also unlocked with 2014. Let's check the call history, Elizabeth said. The recent call list included the hospital, pharmacy, and Richard's name multiple times. What stood out was that Judith had called Richard 3 times the day before she died. Dad and Grandma talked on the phone a lot, huh? Lily murmured. Elizabeth nodded, but inwardly, another question arose. Why did Judith need to speak with her son so many times? And why had Richard never mentioned it? Let's look at the messages too. In the text message history, there was a message from an unknown number. Before you talk to your lawyer, I'd like to meet with you. I have important information. The date was the day before Judith died. As Elizabeth was scrolling through the screen, suddenly the phone in her hand began to vibrate. The ringtone echoed in the quiet room. Ah! Lily cried out in surprise. The screen displayed, unknown caller. Elizabeth and Lily froze, staring at the continuously ringing phone. Grandma. Lily whispered faintly. She wants to talk right now. A chill ran down Elizabeth's spine. Rationally, she knew this was a coincidental wrong number, or perhaps telemarketing. However, the eeriness of the situation was undeniable. The phone kept ringing. On the 5th ring, Elizabeth found herself pressing the answer button. Hello? Her voice trembled. After a moment of silence, a male voice was heard. It was calm but tense. Ma'am, you're in danger. Your life and your daughter's are being targeted. Elizabeth gasped. Who is this? My name isn't important. Richard and I initially only aimed for Judith's insurance money. But now. The man faltered. He won't stop. You're next. Elizabeth felt the blood drain from her entire body. What are you saying? Richard conspired with his mistress Carol to kill Judith. I helped them. I tampered with her medication to induce a heart attack, the man's voice shook. But now, he's planning to make you and your daughter look like an accident. He discovered you're both insured too. Lily clutched Elizabeth's arm. Her small hand was cold and trembling. Elizabeth held her daughter tightly as she continued the call. Who are you? Why would you do this? My name is Mike. I'm Carol's ex-husband. I'm a pharmacist. Richard and she are involved, and they used me. But involving a child. I can't allow that, he exhaled deeply. I have evidence. I'm ready to tell the police everything. In Elizabeth's mind, all the dots connected. Richard's strange behavior, the company's financial crisis, the insurance money, and the sudden heart attack. What should I? Her voice trembled. Leave your house immediately. Go somewhere safe. I'm heading to the police. I'll tell them everything, Mike said urgently. He's coming back from Florida today. To meet with Carol and make the next plan. The moment the call ended, Elizabeth came to her senses. She took a deep breath to regain her composure. Lily looked up at her mother with frightened eyes. Mom, what happened? Lily, hurry. We're going to your friend Sarah's house, Elizabeth said decisively. After that, Mom needs to call the police. She took her daughter's hand and quickly left Judith's house. While getting into the car, Elizabeth called 911. Detective Evans here. Could you please tell me everything from the beginning again? Elizabeth sat in the living room of Lily's friend Sarah's house, staring at the female detective across from her. Lily was playing with Sarah in another room. The police had arrived just 30 minutes after the emergency call, and the investigation began immediately after hearing Elizabeth's story. My mother-in-law, Judith Wilson, died of a heart attack 3 days ago. Elizabeth clutched her coffee cup with trembling hands. At first I thought it was a natural death. But today, a call came to her phone. Elizabeth told everything about the phone call. Mike's confession, Richard's relationship with his secretary Carol, the suspicion that Judith's medication had been tampered with, and the possibility that her and Lily's lives were in danger. Detective Evans carefully took notes. Any other information from this person named Mike? He said he was a pharmacist. Carol Jenkins, my husband's secretary's ex-husband. Jenkins. Detective Evans exchanged glances with her partner. Michael Jenkins. He works at a pharmacy in town. The other detective immediately began making calls. Elizabeth looked out the window. It had started to rain. Mrs. Wilson, where is your husband currently? He said he went on a business trip to Florida. But he should be back today. I understand. Please don't worry. We'll begin our investigation immediately. Your and your daughter's safety is assured. Detective Evans stood up. We'll position a patrol car in front of this house. We'll also place your home under surveillance. Will the police really believe this? Elizabeth asked anxiously. Detective Evans answered with a serious expression. Actually, questions about Judith Wilson's cause of death had already arisen. Her primary physician felt something was off about the heart attack symptoms and had requested an autopsy. Elizabeth's eyes widened. And now, we've received word that Michael Jenkins has turned himself in at the police station, Detective Evans continued. It seems he intends to confess everything. That evening, Elizabeth received a call at Sarah's house. It was from Detective Evans. Mrs. Wilson, we have Michael Jenkins' testimony and the results of Judith's blood test. It confirmed that her medication contained an excessive amount of digoxin. It's a drug that can induce heart attacks. Elizabeth's throat went dry. So, we're proceeding with the investigation as a homicide case. We'll be waiting when your husband Richard Wilson returns home. What should I do? Stay at Sarah's house tonight as instructed. We'll talk more tomorrow. As directed by the police, Elizabeth stayed at Sarah's house with Lily. She couldn't sleep all night. It felt unreal to think that everything she thought she knew about her life, her family, might have been an illusion. The next morning, Elizabeth received another call from Detective Evans. Mrs. Wilson, we arrested your husband last night. Elizabeth's heart leaped. What did Richard say? At first, he denied everything, but when informed that Michael Jenkins had fully confessed. Detective Evans paused momentarily. He confessed too. Elizabeth collapsed into a chair. How am I going to tell Lily? I know this is a difficult time, but could you come to the police station today? We need to share the details with you. In a small conference room at the police station, Detective Evans explained all the facts to Elizabeth. Your husband's company has been in serious financial crisis for the past 2 years. He had over $3 million in debt, and investors were withdrawing one after another. She spread out documents. It seems Judith was concerned about her son's management situation and was investigating. And she was trying to change her will. Change it? Yes. Judith initially intended to leave all her property to Richard, but after learning about his management crisis and inappropriate relationship with Carol Jenkins, she planned to change her will to directly bequeath some assets to your daughter Lily. Elizabeth nodded quietly. So that was Richard's motive for killing his mother. And after Judith's death, Richard claimed the $500,000 life insurance. It seems he intended to use that amount to repay part of the company's debt. But that wasn't enough. Elizabeth realized the terrible truth. So next, we were. Detective Evans nodded with a stern expression. Your husband had taken out a $1 million insurance policy on you and Lily. It was contracted 3 months ago. Elizabeth's head spun. She clung to the table. How was he going to? According to Michael Jenkins, Richard and Carol were planning a car accident with you and Lily, Detective Evans added in a small voice. They were planning to execute it this weekend. Tears flowed from Elizabeth's eyes. Why did Mike warn us? He said, I couldn't involve a child, Detective Evans answered. Out of guilt for participating in Judith's murder, he decided to reveal everything. Elizabeth covered her face with both hands. For years, she thought she had a perfect family. But the reality was horrifyingly different. Richard and Carol will be charged with first-degree murder conspiracy, Detective Evans said. Michael will also be charged as an accomplice, but considering his surrender and cooperation, there's a possibility of a reduced sentence. Before leaving the police station, Elizabeth grabbed Detective Evans' arm. How should I explain this to Lily? Detective Evans smiled gently. The truth, in words she can understand. Children are stronger than we think. And I'll refer you to professional support. Elizabeth nodded slightly. The road ahead would be rough. But Lily and she had survived. Thanks to Judith's final gift. 1 year later, Elizabeth was planting seedlings in the flower bed of her new garden. This small house they had moved to, unlike their previously luxurious home, had become a true home in every sense for her and Lily. Mom, look! Lily came running from the backyard. In her hands was a small box tied with a blue ribbon. I found a blue jay's nest. Baby birds are about to be born. Elizabeth touched her daughter's cheek with her soil-covered hand and smiled. How wonderful! The beginning of life is always beautiful. The trial had ended 6 months ago. Richard and Carol were each sentenced to life imprisonment for first-degree murder. Michael Jenkins received a 10-year sentence, considering his cooperation. The first few months were hellish. Especially telling Lily the truth was the most painful moment in Elizabeth's life. However, with the help of an excellent child psychologist, the two gradually recovered. The mail's here, Elizabeth said as she entered the house. On the living room table were several letters. Bills, advertisements, and an envelope with unfamiliar handwriting. It was addressed to Elizabeth Anderson, the maiden name she had returned to after the divorce. Elizabeth opened the letter. It bore the postmark of a rehabilitation facility in New York State. Dear Elizabeth, the letter began. I cannot make amends for what I did to you and Lily. However, every day, I face my sins and try to become a better person. I've started volunteer work within the prison, helping young inmates find their path to rehabilitation. Elizabeth continued reading quietly. I believe that the only good deed I've done in saving lives was saving yours. Please tell Lily never to forget how much her grandmother loved her. Michael Jenkins. Elizabeth held the letter to her chest. Looking out the window, she decided to write back. Thank you for acknowledging your mistake and saving our lives. After dinner, Lily brought out Judith's photo album. They sat side by side, turning the pages of memories. Grandma saved us, didn't she? Lily said, touching Judith's photo. Yes, she's always watching over us, Elizabeth hugged her daughter. Outside the window, the sunset was sinking toward the horizon. A symbol of the end of a day and a new beginning. Elizabeth took a deep breath. Life had taken an unexpected direction, but she and Lily had grown stronger. She now truly understood that a real family isn't about blood ties, but a relationship where people cherish and protect each other. Tomorrow, she would mail her reply to Michael. The past cannot be changed, but the future is in their hands. Elizabeth stroked her daughter's hair and smiled quietly.